Hi guys, tonight we're stepping into the shadowed halls of feudal Japan where honor cuts deeper than any blade. Drop your city and local time in the comments, it's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe light a candle for that gentle glow, and let's walk together into a world where death was preferable to shame. You wake up in 1603. The sun hasn't risen, but you're already kneeling on the cold wooden floors, your knees screaming against the unforgiving surface. Your name is Takeshi, and you've just discovered that your lord has been plotting against the shogun. The penalty for treason isn't just death, it's the complete erasure of your family line, your ancestors' honour, and everything you've ever believed in. Your hands shake as you grip your wakizashi, the shorter of your two swords, not from fear of dying, but from the terror of living with dishonour. In this world, suicide isn't just an option, sometimes it's the only honourable choice left. The morning light filters through paper screens like judgment itself, casting long shadows across tatami mats that have witnessed countless final moments. Your stomach churns, but not from hunger. You ate your last meal yesterday, knowing it might truly be your last. Rice, pickled vegetables, and sake that tasted like liquid regret. Your wife prepared it without speaking, her hand steady despite the tears she refused to shed. Children in feudal Japan learned early that tears were weakness, and weakness was death. The ritual blade feels heavier than it should, like it's made of compressed shame rather than steel. You've practiced this moment your entire life, training your mind to accept what your body refuses to understand. The cut must be precise, left to right across your abdomen, then upward if you have the strength. Your best friend waits behind you with his katana, ready to grant you mercy if you falter. Listen to the gentle drip of morning dew from the eaves outside, each drop marking time you no longer own. Your breathing creates tiny clouds in the cold air, each exhale a countdown to silence. The cherry blossoms outside are in full bloom, their beauty a cruel reminder that life continues even when yours doesn't. But this isn't just about one man's honour. This is about a system so rigid that it would rather see its best warriors dead than compromised. The samurai code demanded perfection in an imperfect world, creating a culture where suicide was so common they had dozens of words for different types of honourable death. Your lord's betrayal wasn't even his choice. He was forced into rebellion by impossible demands from Edo, taxes that would starve his domain, and loyalty oaths that contradicted each other like competing commandments. In samurai society, you could die for obeying orders just as easily as disobeying them. The system was designed to consume its own. The irony burns worse than the blade will. You're about to die for a man who was already dead the moment he chose politics over principle. Your family will lose everything, their home, their status, their future. Your children will become outcasts, forbidden from serving any lord, condemned to live as masterless wanderers in a society that views independence as spiritual leprosy. Your fingers trace the silk wrapping of your sword handle, feeling every imperfection in the weave. These hands have calloused over 20 years of training, scarred from countless practice sessions, hardened by discipline that would break modern minds. They've never trembled before, but they're trembling now. Not from cowardice, from the crushing weight of absolute certainty. The ritual demands witnesses, but their faces blur like watercolours in rain. These men who call themselves your brothers will watch you disembowel yourself and call it beautiful. They'll compose poems about your courage while your intestines steam in the morning air. This is bushido, the way of the warrior, where death is art and suffering is virtue. Yet something darker lurks beneath this performance of honour. The samurai code you're dying for was created by politicians who never held swords, enforced by lords who lived in luxury while their retainers starved on principle. You're about to become a ghost to maintain a system that profits from your ghost. What happens when honour becomes indistinguishable from suicide and tradition transforms into tyranny? The blade enters your flesh like a key turning in a lock you never wanted to open. Pain explodes through your nervous system, but you've trained for this moment since childhood. Samurai children practiced mental discipline by holding burning incense sticks until their flesh blistered, learning to separate consciousness from agony. Your father once made you kneel on rice grains for an entire night because you flinched during sword practice. Blood pools in your white kimono like spilled ink on parchment, each drop a word in a suicide letter written in suffering. Your breathing becomes sharp, deliberate gasps as your body realizes what your mind has already accepted. The witnesses murmur prayers that sound like distant thunder, their voices blending with the ringing in your ears that accompanies massive blood loss. Your best friend, Kenji, adjusts his grip on his katana. His face shows no emotion, but you've known him since childhood. You can read the microscopic tremor in his jaw muscle. He's calculating angles and timing, preparing to sever your head cleanly if you lose the strength to complete the ritual yourself. This mercy stroke called kaishaku requires perfect precision. Too early and you're murdered, too late and you die screaming. The pain transforms into something beyond physical sensation. It becomes a presence, a living thing that crawls through your intestines like a hungry animal. Traditional samurai training included meditation techniques designed to help warriors transcend bodily suffering, but no amount of mental preparation can fully negate having your organs exposed to air they were never meant to touch. Listen to the sound of your own blood dripping onto tatami mats, each drop a tiny percussion in the symphony of your ending. The rhythm is hypnotic, almost peaceful, like rain on a temple roof during evening prayers. Your vision starts to narrow, the world becoming a tunnel with darkness creeping in from all sides. But even as you're dying, the political machinery that killed you continues grinding. Your lord's rebellion was doomed from the moment he conceived it. The shogun's spies infiltrated his council months ago, feeding him false intelligence and manipulating him into treason like a puppet master controlling strings he couldn't see. Your death is just cleanup tying off loose threads in a conspiracy that spans provinces. Your family doesn't know yet. They're still sleeping in rooms that will be confiscated before sunrise, dreaming dreams that will become nightmares when they wake. Your eldest son, barely 16, will be given a choice: become a monk and renounce his heritage, or follow his father into death. In feudal Japan, children inherited their parents' dishonor like a genetic curse. The samurai sitting behind you shift slightly, their silk hakama rustling like autumn leaves. They're witnessing what they call the ultimate expression of warrior spirit, but their eyes hold something that looks suspiciously like relief. Relief that it's you bleeding instead of them, that fate chose your family for destruction instead of theirs. Honor, you realize through waves of increasing agony, is often just cowardice dressed in ceremonial robes. Your wife knew this moment would come eventually. Samurai wives were trained in suicide techniques just as thoroughly as their husbands, expected to follow their spouses into death to preserve family honor. She's probably sharpening her own dagger right now, preparing to drive it through her throat with the same precision she once used for flower arranging. Death was the family business in feudal Japan. The cherry blossoms outside begin to fall, their petals drifting past the window like pink snow. In samurai poetry, falling blossoms symbolize the brief, beautiful lives of warriors who died young and honorable. The irony is so perfect it would be funny if you weren't currently dying. You're becoming a metaphor in real time, your actual suffering transformed into aesthetic appreciation for observers who get to go home afterward. Your vision blurs further as blood loss reaches critical levels. The faces around you become impressionistic smears, their features dissolving like paintings left in rain. But you can still hear their breathing, still sense their anticipation. They're waiting for the moment when Kenji's blade falls, when your head separates from your body in one perfect stroke that will be discussed and analysed for years. Yet something feels wrong about this entire performance. The ritual purity, the aesthetic beauty, the transformation of suicide into spiritual achievement, it all seems designed to disguise something uglier. What if honor was just the story they told to make murder and control sound noble? Kenji's sword whistles through the air with a sound like wind through bamboo, severing your head so cleanly that consciousness persists for several impossible seconds. You watch your body topple forward, blood pumping from your neck in rhythmic spurts that paint the white tatami mats in spreading crimson pools. The witnesses bow deeply, murmuring prayers for your spirit's peaceful journey to the afterlife. But your story doesn't end with death. It begins. Within hours, your suicide becomes legend, your suffering transformed into inspiration for other samurai facing similar choices. Poets will write verses about your final moments, artists will paint your death scene, and mothers will tell their sons about your courage, while training them to die with equal beauty. Your eldest son, Hiroshi, wakes to find soldiers surrounding his home. the boy who practiced calligraphy yesterday morning, is informed that he's now a criminal by association, his father's honourable death insufficient to wash away the stain of rebellion. He's given 3 choices: immediate seppuku to join you in death, exile to a monastery where he'll spend his life atoning for crimes he didn't commit, or Ronin status, becoming a masterless samurai in a society that despises independence. The neighbours who once bowed respectfully when your family passed now avert their eyes and hurry their children indoors. Disgrace spreads like plague in feudal Japan, contaminating everyone connected to the dishonoured family. Your wife's relatives send messages disowning her, your business partners dissolve their agreements, and even your servants flee rather than be associated with traitors. Listen to the sound of your family's belongings being catalogued by government officials, each item assessed for value before confiscation. Your grandfather's sword, passed down through 7 generations, becomes property of the state. Your wife's silk kimonos, embroidered with family crests that are now illegal to display, will be burned or sold to merchants who deal in forbidden goods. Your wife, Yoshiko, performs her own ritual suicide 3 days later. Unlike your public ceremony, hers happens in private, witnessed only by a single servant who will report the details to authorities. She uses a kaiken, a small dagger designed specifically for women's suicide, driving it through her throat with the precision her mother taught her alongside tea ceremony and flower arrangement. Her death poem, written in elegant calligraphy, expresses gratitude for 20 years of marriage and regret for the shame her continued existence would bring to your memory. But the system that demanded your deaths continues operating without pause. Your lord's lands are redistributed to loyal vassals, his rebellion forgotten, except as a cautionary tale. The shogun's control grows stronger, each act of ritualized suicide reinforcing the message that resistance equals death, that questioning authority means family extinction. Your youngest daughter, only 8 years old, is sold to a merchant family in Kyoto. She'll grow up with a new name, forbidden from mentioning her true heritage, taught to forget the father who chose death over dishonour. In 10 years, she won't remember your face, only the vague sense of loss that haunts children who grow up explaining why they have no family history. The cherry blossoms outside your former home continue falling, covering the bloodstains on the veranda where you died. Spring rain washes away the physical evidence of your suicide, but the psychological impact ripples outward like stones dropped in still water. Other samurai, facing similar impossible choices, remember your example and choose death over compromise. This is the dark heart of bushido, a code so rigid it required constant human sacrifice to maintain its purity. Every generation of samurai children grew up knowing they might be called upon to die for abstract principles they barely understood, in service to lords who viewed them as expendable tools of political control. Your death isn't tragedy, it's policy. The samurai class was designed to consume itself, to channel warrior energy into self-destruction rather than rebellion. The more honourably samurai died, the more completely they served a system that profited from their absence. Dead heroes couldn't question orders, demand better treatment, or organise resistance against exploitation. The final irony reveals itself in the months following your suicide. Your lord's rebellion was encouraged by the shogun's advisors, who needed an excuse to confiscate his lands and eliminate potential opposition. Your honourable death was part of someone else's political strategy, your sacrifice transformed into someone else's profit. What price is honour truly worth when the system demanding it profits from your payment? 6 months after your ritual suicide, the economic machinery of feudal Japan hums along as if your family never existed. Your former lands now belong to a cousin of the shogun, a man who's never held a sword but understands the mathematics of loyalty. The rice fields you died protecting produce the same harvest, but the profits flow to Edo instead of feeding the retainers who served your bloodline for generations. Your replacement lord arrives with ledgers instead of battle plans, calculating taxation rates while your former soldiers dig graves for their own relevance. The new administration doesn't need experienced samurai, it needs accountants who can extract maximum profit from peasant labour without triggering revolts. Expertise in swordsmanship becomes worthless overnight, like trying to pay modern bills with antique coins. The 43 retainers who served, under your command, face an impossible choice that your suicide created for them. They can't serve other lords because your dishonour makes them unemployable. guilt by association in a society where reputation determines survival. They can't become merchants because samurai blood forbids commercial activity, and they can't become farmers because they lack the skills and social connections necessary for agricultural success. Most choose to become ronin, masterless wanderers who sell their martial skills to whoever can afford them. But even this degraded existence proves elusive in a country where violence is strictly regulated by the state. Private armies are illegal, dueling is forbidden, and the shogun's peace eliminates most opportunities for legitimate warrior employment. They drift from town to town like living ghosts, their social death more complete than your physical one. Listen to the sound of rain on the thatched roof of a cheap inn, where 3 of your former retainers share a single room, pooling their dwindling funds to afford 1 meal per day. Their swords, once symbols of honour and status, now serve as collateral for loans they can't repay. The innkeeper eyes their weapons with the calculating gaze of a pawnbroker, knowing that desperate samurai make poor negotiators. The economic ripples of your death spread far beyond your immediate retainers. The local blacksmith who forged and maintained your soldiers' weapons loses his primary source of income. The sake merchant who supplied your household celebrations watches his business collapse as other samurai families distance themselves from anyone connected to your disgrace. Even the Buddhist temple where your family worshipped for generations suffers as donations dry up and new patrons avoid association with tainted ground. Your son Hiroshi, now a novice monk in a mountain monastery, tends gardens and copies sutras while trying to forget 20 years of samurai training. His calloused hands, once expert at swordwork, crack and bleed from hauling water and grinding rice. The abbot assigned him the most menial task deliberately, ensuring that pride gets scraped away like old paint until only submission remains. But monastery life offers its own form of suicide. Hiroshi watches older monks who arrived as samurai refugees, their warrior spirits slowly poisoned by decades of enforced humility. They shuffle through daily routines like sleepwalkers, their eyes empty of the fire that once defined their existence. Some whisper that joining a monastery just prolongs the dying process. Stretching final moments across entire lifetimes, the merchant family that bought your youngest daughter treats her well enough, but she exists in a constant state of economic precariousness. Her new parents remind her regularly that she owes them gratitude for rescuing her from starvation, that her maintenance represents financial sacrifice they could have invested elsewhere. She learns to make herself useful through domestic labour and absolute obedience, understanding that disposability is her permanent condition. Your wife's silk kimonos, sold at auction after her suicide, end up adorning the wives of merchants who've grown wealthy from the political instability your deaths helped create. These nouveau-riche families buy samurai artifacts like trophies, displaying the beautiful objects while remaining ignorant of the suffering their creation required. Your family's cultural heritage becomes interior decoration for people who view honour as an expensive luxury they can now afford. The government officials who confiscated your property receive commissions based on the value they extract, creating incentives for maximising family destruction. They develop expertise in transforming human tragedy into bureaucratic profit, cataloguing desperation with the same precision their predecessors used for recording rice harvests. Suicide becomes a revenue stream for a state that feeds on its own warriors. Even the Buddhist priests who performed your funeral rites benefit economically from samurai self-destruction. Ritual suicide generates expensive ceremonies, memorial services, and ongoing prayers for the dead, all requiring payment from families already impoverished by confiscation and exile. Death becomes a luxury service that struggling survivors can barely afford but dare not refuse. The deeper you examine the economics, the clearer the pattern becomes. Your honourable suicide generated profit for everyone except the people closest to you. The system wasn't designed to preserve honour. It was engineered to convert warrior loyalty into transferable wealth. The rice harvest from your former domain produces 3,000 koku this season, enough grain to feed 1,500 people for an entire year. Your replacement lord sells 2/3 of this harvest to urban merchants at premium prices, keeping detailed records of profit margins that would have been incomprehensible to you. Where you saw responsibility to feed your people, he sees commodity speculation and market manipulation. The peasants who worked these fields under your protection now labour under a taxation system that extracts 70% of their produce instead of the traditional 50%. The additional 20% doesn't improve infrastructure, fund education, or strengthen local defences. It flows directly to Edo as proof of the new lord's loyalty and administrative efficiency. Starvation becomes a performance metric for political reliability. Your former castle, once the administrative heart of a functioning domain, transforms into a regional tax collection centre. The rooms where you held council meetings with retainers now house accounting clerks who calculate extraction rates down to individual rice grains. The armory where you maintained weapons for domain defence becomes a warehouse for storing confiscated goods from other families marked for destruction. The merchants who bid on your family's possessions represent a new class of vulture capitalists who specialise in political carry-on. They attend execution ceremonies and suicide rituals not from morbid curiosity but as business reconnaissance. These entrepreneurs have developed sophisticated networks for acquiring and redistributing the material wealth of destroyed samurai families, turning tragedy into inventory. Listen to the clicking of abacus beads in the office that used to be your private study, where clerks calculate the monetary value of honour itself. Your grandfather's calligraphy scrolls are assessed at 2 bu each, your father's armour valued at 43 ryo, and your personal sword collection appraised like agricultural tools rather than spiritual artefacts. Everything that defined your family's identity gets reduced to numbers in a ledger. Your daughter's new merchant family operates a textile business that profits directly from samurai destruction. They purchase silk kimonos, tea ceremony implements, and decorative objects from confiscated estates, then resell them to wealthy townsmen who want to appropriate samurai aesthetics without accepting samurai risks. Cultural heritage becomes fashion accessories for people who view tradition as interior decoration. The Ronin created by your suicide represent a massive economic opportunity for criminal organisations that recruit desperate former warriors. Yakuza groups offer these masterless samurai employment in illegal activities, debt collection, intimidation, underground gambling enforcement, that utilises their combat skills while keeping them dependent on criminal networks. Honour becomes human resources for organised crime. Some of your former retainers attempt to establish private schools where they teach martial arts to merchant children whose parents can afford warrior training as status symbols. But even this degraded form of employment proves unstable, as the government periodically cracks down on unauthorised weapons instruction that might threaten state monopoly on violence. Teaching becomes another form of economic precarity. The Buddhist monastery where your son seeks spiritual redemption operates on an economic model that depends heavily on samurai refugees who arrive with whatever wealth they manage to hide from confiscation. These desperate novice monks often donate family treasures to secure admission, providing religious institutions with steady streams of valuable cultural artifacts that can be sold or traded when cash flow problems arise. Your wife's family, desperate to distance themselves from your disgrace, liquidates all connections to your bloodline at significant financial loss. They sell properties below market value, dissolve business partnerships prematurely, and pay substantial bribes to have their family name removed from official records linking them to your rebellion. Disassociation becomes another profit centre for bureaucrats who charge fees for administrative amnesia. The regional daimyo who remained loyal during your lord's rebellion receive territorial rewards carved from confiscated domains. These expansions of their holdings come with attached populations of displaced samurai who must be managed, monitored, or eliminated. Loyalty gets rewarded with other people's problems, creating cycles of instability that justify further political crackdowns. The craftsmen who created your family's beautiful possessions, swordsmiths, lacquer artists, silk weavers, lose their most reliable patrons when samurai families face extinction. These artisans must adapt their skills to serve merchant tastes, creating inferior products for customers who prioritize cost over quality. Traditional craftsmanship gets corrupted by commercial demands from buyers who don't understand what they're purchasing. Even the executioners who carry out ritual suicide ceremonies receive payment for their services, developing professional expertise in theatrical death that commands premium prices from families desperate to die beautifully. The kaishaku who performs the mercy stroke must be skilled enough to ensure clean decapitation, experienced enough to time the cut perfectly, and discreet enough to maintain confidentiality about private family tragedies. The economic web surrounding your suicide reveals a disturbing truth. The samurai class existed primarily to generate wealth for everyone else through their systematic destruction. 3 years after your death, a comprehensive audit of your former domain's economic transformation reveals the true mathematics of honor. The new lord has increased annual revenue by 340% through systematic exploitation of the same resources you managed with traditional paternalistic methods. Peasant mortality rates have risen 60%, but tax collection efficiency has improved dramatically enough to earn commendation from the shogun's financial advisors. The 43 masterless samurai created by your suicide have generated secondary economic effects that ripple through Japan's underground economy. 18 have joined criminal organizations as enforcers, 7 have become bandits preying on merchant caravans, 12 have entered illegal dueling circuits where desperate warriors fight to the death for gambling entertainment, and 6 have committed suicide when their funds ran out completely. Your son Hiroshi, now in his 4th year of monastery life, has become a case study in the economics of spiritual destruction. The temple extracts labour from refugee samurai at rates below what they would pay ordinary peasants, while charging these same refugees premium fees for room, board, and religious instruction. Monasteries have evolved into profitable detention centres for inconvenient warriors whose existence threatens political stability. The merchant who purchased your youngest daughter has arranged her marriage to his business partner's son, calculating that her samurai bloodline, despite its current disgrace, may become valuable again if political winds shift. Child refugees from these destroyed families represent long-term investment opportunities for entrepreneurs who can afford to speculate on the future rehabilitation of tainted bloodlines. Her childhood becomes a commodity futures contract. Listen to the sound of coins changing hands in tea houses, where former samurai sell information about their previous lord's military capabilities, defensive preparations, and political connections. These desperate men transform their lifetime accumulations of confidential knowledge into survival currency, betraying dead masters to buy temporary continuation of their own meaningless existence. Loyalty becomes a liquidated asset. The weapons and armour from your family's collection have been redistributed to create a small private army for a merchant consortium that operates outside legal oversight. Your grandfather's katana, forged by master swordsmiths and blessed by Shinto priests, now serves as a tool of commercial intimidation in debt collection operations. Sacred objects become instruments of economic coercion. Regional blacksmiths have diversified their businesses to capitalize on the steady stream of desperate samurai seeking to sell family heirlooms. These craftsmen have developed expertise in melting down precious swords to create agricultural tools, transforming symbols of warrior honor into farming implements for the peasant class. The metallurgy of destruction generates steady profits from cultural dissolution. Your former castle now houses a textile manufacturing operation that exploits displaced samurai wives and daughters as seamstresses, working under conditions that approach slavery. These women, forbidden from most forms of employment by social taboos, accept starvation wages to perform intricate embroidery work that gets sold to wealthy merchants as authentic samurai craftsmanship. Their skills become trapped labour in economic systems designed to consume their expertise. The local sake brewery has expanded production dramatically to serve the growing population of ronin, who drown their purposelessness in alcohol. The brewer has created specialised products marketed specifically to masterless warriors, cheap, potent drinks that provide rapid intoxication for customers whose primary goal is temporary unconsciousness rather than social enjoyment. Despair becomes a target demographic. Buddhist temples throughout Japan have begun offering specialized services for samurai families facing extinction, accelerated cremation ceremonies, bulk discount funeral rates, and group memorial services that reduce per capita costs for multiple family suicides. Religious institutions have developed economies of scale around warrior self-destruction, making death affordable for impoverished people who can't afford to keep living. The government has established a new bureaucratic position, the Office of Dishonored Properties, staffed by officials who specialize in extracting maximum value from confiscated samurai estates. These administrators have developed sophisticated techniques for appraising cultural artifacts, evaluating agricultural productivity, and liquidating human capital through slave markets disguised as adoption services. Your death certificate, issued by regional authorities, includes detailed financial information about your family's asset forfeiture, making these documents valuable intelligence sources for merchants who specialize in acquiring distressed properties. Even the paperwork documenting your suicide has become a commodity in information markets, where traders buy and sell details about upcoming opportunities for vulture capitalism. The economics reveal the system's true purpose. The samurai class was never meant to survive its own code of honor. It was designed as a self-consuming machine that transformed warrior energy into transferable wealth through ritualized self-destruction. Every honorable death made someone else rich. Every act of loyalty generated profit for administrators who sold death certificates like hunting licenses. The final accounting shows that your suicide created approximately 200 ryo of value for various beneficiaries, while destroying roughly 2,000 ryo of accumulated family wealth. The mathematics of honor operate at a systematic loss, converting concentrated samurai resources into distributed profits for everyone except the warriors themselves. Your son begins his warrior education at age 7, the same age when modern children learn to tie their shoes. But instead of fumbling with laces, little Hiroshi practices fumbling with wooden swords that weigh nearly as much as his entire body. The training compound echoes with the sounds of children grunting under physical demands that would hospitalize contemporary adults, their small voices calling out memorized phrases about preferring death to dishonor. The first lesson involves learning to sit in Caesar position for progressively longer periods, knees folded beneath the body in a posture that cuts off circulation and creates intense pain in the legs and lower back. 7-year-olds must maintain this position for 30 minutes without moving, their faces blank masks hiding agony that builds with each passing moment. Teachers walk among the rows of children, striking anyone who shifts position with bamboo rods that leave welts across shoulders and arms. Your boy learns to recite the names of famous samurai who died honorably, warriors who disemboweled themselves rather than surrender, fathers who killed their own children to prevent capture, generals who committed suicide when their strategies failed. These stories are presented as fairy tales, beautiful narratives about noble choices that children should aspire to emulate. Death becomes bedtime stories for warriors in training. The calligraphy lessons seem innocent until you understand what children are being taught to write. Instead of copying poetry or philosophical texts, young samurai practice writing suicide notes, farewell letters to family members, and death poems that express gratitude for the opportunity to die meaningfully. Their small hands carefully brush characters that describe disembowelment, decapitation, and spiritual purification through self-inflicted suffering. Art class becomes rehearsal for extinction. Listen to the sound of wooden practice swords striking each other in a rhythm that matches heartbeats. Young warriors learning combat timing by synchronizing violence with their own pulse rates. The training isn't designed to create effective fighters. 7-year-olds lack the strength and coordination for real combat. Instead, it conditions children to associate physical pain with spiritual achievement, teaching them that suffering equals virtue and endurance demonstrates worthiness. The boys sleep on thin mats in unheated dormitories, even during winter months when their breath creates frost clouds in the darkness. Comfort is presented as moral weakness, warmth as spiritual corruption. Children learn to associate basic human needs with shame, developing psychological frameworks that will later make suicide seem preferable to failure, death more acceptable than disappointing authority figures who equate love with absolute obedience. Meals consist of rice gruel and pickled vegetables, carefully portioned to provide minimum nutrition necessary for survival without allowing the luxury of satisfaction. Hunger becomes a constant companion, teaching young warriors that physical wants are obstacles to spiritual development. These children learn to ignore their body's signals, developing the dissociative skills necessary for later disemboweling themselves with ceremonial precision. The instructors are themselves former child soldiers, men who survived this same conditioning process and now inflict it on the next generation with the mechanical efficiency of torture victims who've become torturers. They show no emotion while striking children, no compassion when students collapse from exhaustion, no mercy when young warriors fail to meet impossible standards. Their faces are masks of disciplined indifference, demonstrating the psychological death that awaits successful graduates. Your son's education includes detailed instruction in the mechanics of seppuku, including proper blade angles, cutting techniques, and breathing methods that help maintain consciousness during disembowelment. 8-year-old children practice these motions with wooden knives, rehearsing their own deaths with the same dedication other cultures reserve for learning musical instruments. Suicide becomes muscle memory before they understand what murder means. The compound library contains exclusively military histories and philosophical texts that glorify warrior sacrifice. Children read stories about soldiers who chose death over capture, parents who murdered their families to prevent, dishonor, and heroes whose greatest achievements involved beautiful self-destruction. There are no stories about samurai who lived long lives, retired peacefully, or found happiness outside combat. Survival becomes failure in the moral universe these children inhabit. Social interactions are carefully controlled to prevent the formation of emotional bonds that might interfere with absolute loyalty to lords and parents. Children who show excessive attachment to friends face punishment for prioritizing personal relationships over duty. They learn that love is weakness, friendship is distraction, and emotional connection represents dangerous selfishness that undermines warrior discipline. The psychological architecture being constructed in these young minds creates adults who view suicide as spiritual achievement, suffering as moral virtue, and absolute obedience as the highest form of wisdom. By age 12, most students have internalized worldviews that make questioning authority literally unthinkable, resistance emotionally impossible, and self-preservation morally repugnant. What kind of society systematically traumatizes its children to create adults who kill themselves on command? By age 12, your son has progressed to advanced studies in what educators euphemistically call loyalty exercises, psychological conditioning designed to eliminate independent moral reasoning. Students practice scenarios where they must choose between saving their families and obeying their lords, with any hesitation earning severe punishment. The correct answer is always absolute submission to authority, regardless of personal cost or moral implications. The training scenarios become increasingly sophisticated and disturbing. Children are presented with hypothetical situations where their lords order them to murder innocent people, betray allies, or commit acts they instinctively recognize as wrong. The educational process systematically destroys their capacity for ethical judgment, replacing natural moral intuition with reflexive compliance. Questions like, "Is this right?" become literally unthinkable for properly conditioned warriors. Advanced students learn about famous historical precedents where samurai obeyed obviously immoral orders and received praise for their unquestioning loyalty. They study cases where warriors slaughtered civilians, betrayed friends, or enabled atrocities because their lords commanded such actions. These examples are presented as inspiring demonstrations of perfect discipline, teaching children that moral responsibility is a luxury only available to people who lack true honor. The dormitory system isolates children from outside influences that might contaminate their programming with alternative values. They have no contact with merchants who might demonstrate that life has purposes beyond warfare. No interaction with farmers who might show that productivity matters more than destruction. No exposure to Buddhist monks who might suggest that all life has value. Their social universe contains only people who share identical conditioning and identical limitations. Listen to the sound of young voices reciting oaths of absolute loyalty, words that bind them to obey any command without question or hesitation. These vows are administered at age 13, before students have developed sufficient cognitive maturity to understand what they're promising. They swear to kill their parents if ordered, murder their siblings if commanded, and disembowel themselves if requested. Childhood ends with legalized promises to commit any atrocity their future lords might require. Physical conditioning intensifies as bodies mature enough to handle more severe abuse. Students practice sitting in painful positions for hours, holding heavy objects until muscles spasm, and maintaining perfect posture while instructors strike them with bamboo rods. The training creates dissociative responses to physical pain, teaching young warriors to separate consciousness from bodily experience. They learn to observe their own suffering with detached interest rather than human sympathy. The curriculum includes specialized instruction in recognizing and suppressing emotional responses that might interfere with combat effectiveness or absolute obedience. Students learn to identify feelings of fear, compassion, doubt, or personal attachment as spiritual weaknesses that require immediate correction. They develop internal monitoring systems that detect and eliminate unauthorized emotional experiences before such feelings can influence behavior or decision-making. Marriage arrangements are determined by military considerations rather than personal compatibility or emotional connection. Students learn that their future wives will be selected based on political alliances, economic benefits, and eugenic principles designed to produce physically superior warriors. Romance is presented as a dangerous delusion that undermines devotion to duty. Love becomes treason against the state that owns their reproductive capacity. The boys study detailed accounts of women who performed honourable suicide to avoid capture, preserve family honour, or demonstrate loyalty to dead husbands. These stories are presented as models for their future wives, teaching male students that they have the right to expect female family members to kill themselves when circumstances require such demonstrations of virtue. Marriage vows include death-fated pacts disguised as romantic commitment. Advanced training introduces psychological torture techniques designed to break prisoners who might possess valuable military intelligence. Students learn methods for causing maximum suffering while keeping victims conscious and responsive. The education isn't presented as cruelty, but as necessary skills for protecting their domains from enemy infiltration. Torture becomes patriotic duty performed by honourable warriors serving righteous causes. The final year of education involves actual participation in executions, where students serve as assistants during ritual suicides performed by disgraced samurai. They observe the mechanics of ceremonial death up close, learning to remain emotionally unmoved while watching human beings disembowel themselves with religious precision. These experiences are presented as spiritual education, teaching young warriors to view death as artistic performance rather than human tragedy. Graduation ceremonies involve taking lives for the first time, usually condemned criminals or prisoners of war who can be killed without political consequences. The first murder is ritualized as a rite of passage, transforming students into adult warriors through participation in legalized homicide. They learn that taking human life feels different from killing animals, and that the difference stops mattering after the first few deaths. The educational system produces adults who are psychologically incapable of questioning authority, emotionally numb to their own suffering, and morally blind to the implications of their actions. These aren't warriors in any meaningful sense. They're human weapons programmed for self-destruction, manufactured through child abuse, and disguised as spiritual development. Your son's education concludes with a ceremony that perfectly encapsulates the system's true purpose. A ritual where 16-year-old graduates formally surrender their individual identities to become property of their assigned lords. The students kneel in rows like crops ready for harvest, their faces blank with the dissociative calm that indicates successful psychological conditioning. They speak vows of absolute servitude in voices that sound hollow, as if the words are being generated by machines wearing human faces. The ceremony includes a symbolic burning for personal possessions that might represent individual identity or emotional attachment to anything other than duty. Students throw letters from family members, childhood toys, and drawings they created during rare moments of unsupervised creativity into a bonfire that consumes the last traces of their humanity. The smoke carries away their capacity for independent thought, leaving behind perfectly obedient instruments of violence. Parents attend these graduation ceremonies and express pride in children who have been systematically traumatized beyond recognition. Mothers who once sung lullabies to comfort crying babies now celebrate sons who feel nothing, fear nothing, and question nothing. Fathers who taught toddlers to walk now applaud young men whose greatest achievement is the ability to kill themselves on command. The inversion of natural parental instincts represents the system's complete triumph over human nature. The newly graduated warriors are immediately assigned to lords they've never met, men who will own them completely until death separates the relationship. These assignments are made based on political considerations, economic calculations, and strategic military planning. No one cares whether the human resources being distributed are compatible with their new owners. Warriors become livestock traded between powerful families for purposes the animals themselves aren't allowed to understand. Listen to the sound of your son's voice as he swears loyalty to a lord whose name he learned 5 minutes ago, promising to obey any command without question or delay. His tone is flat, emotionless, mechanical, the voice of someone who has been successfully transformed from a human being into a tool. The child who once laughed at butterflies and cried when puppies died now speaks like a Buddhist prayer wheel, generating sounds without meaning or feeling. The lords who receive these fresh warriors treat them with casual indifference, like merchants examining purchased goods for defects. They test the new acquisitions by issuing arbitrary commands. Stand here, sit there, hold this position for 2 hours, watching for signs of independent thought or emotional response. Any trace of personality that survived the educational process gets identified and eliminated through additional conditioning that continues until perfect compliance is achieved. Your son's first assignment involves guarding empty rooms in his lord's castle, standing motionless for 12-hour shifts while watching nothing happen. This isn't security duty, it's psychological conditioning designed to reinforce absolute obedience to meaningless commands. The young warrior learns that his function is to follow orders, not to accomplish objectives or serve rational purposes. Meaning becomes irrelevant for tools designed only to comply. The barracks where new warriors live resemble prison cells more than military housing. 8 men share spaces designed for 4, sleeping on floors without bedding, eating meals that provide minimum nutrition necessary for survival. The conditions are deliberately harsh, not from economic necessity, but to reinforce the message that their comfort means nothing. Their welfare matters only insofar as it affects their utility to lords who own them completely. Communication between warriors is monitored and restricted to prevent the formation of bonds that might create competing loyalties. They are forbidden from discussing their families, their past lives, or their feelings about their current circumstances. Conversations must focus exclusively on duty, technique, and demonstrations of loyalty to masters who view them as animated property rather than human beings with thoughts, dreams, or emotional needs. The young warriors are given numbers instead of names, further erasing their individual identities in favour of administrative convenience. Your son becomes Unit 23, a designation that appears on duty rosters, meal allocations, and equipment assignments. The name you gave him at birth, chosen with love and hope for his future happiness, gets replaced by a catalogue number that reflects his current status as inventory in someone else's military organisation. Punishment for minor infractions involves psychological torture techniques that make physical pain seem like mercy. Warriors who show traces of independent personality are subjected to sensory deprivation, forced isolation, and systematic humiliation designed to break whatever remains of their selfhood. The goal isn't correction but obliteration, the complete destruction of human individuality that might interfere with mechanical obedience. The system succeeds so completely that most warriors genuinely believe their conditioning represents spiritual achievement rather than psychological destruction. They interpret their emotional numbness as enlightenment, their absolute compliance as wisdom, their readiness for suicide as the highest form of honour. The victims become the system's most effective advocates, recruiting new generations of children for the same abuse they suffered. Yet something darker lurks beneath this apparent success. The realization that this systematic dehumanization wasn't an accident or byproduct of military necessity, but the deliberate goal of an entire culture that required psychological slaves to maintain political control. What kind of civilization deliberately destroys its own children's humanity and calls the result honor? The rain continues falling on empty training grounds where tomorrow's warriors will learn to hate themselves efficiently, and the cycle begins again with fresh 7-year-olds who still laugh at butterflies. You're 23 years old and worth exactly 47 Rio to your lord, less than a decent warhorse, more than a year's rice for a peasant family. This isn't poetry, it's accounting. Every samurai carries an invisible price tag calculated from training costs, equipment investments, and projected battlefield utility. Your death has been budgeted into next year's military expenses like arrows and horseshoes. The regional conflict that will kill you started 6 months ago in a merchant's ledger, not on any battlefield. 2 daimyo discovered that controlling a specific mountain pass could increase toll revenues by 300%, making war more profitable than peace. The dispute isn't about honour, territory, or ancient grudges. It's about quarterly earnings projections and return on investment calculations that treat human lives as operational expenses. Your lord borrowed money from Kyoto financiers to fund this campaign, using his samurai's lives as collateral for loans that charge 12% annual interest. The contract specifies that warrior deaths in battle reduce the debt principal, creating perverse incentives where your survival actually costs him money. You're fighting in a war designed to liquidate the very people doing the fighting. Listen to the sound of coins being counted in the command tent while you sharpen your sword in the rain, each clink representing someone's calculated death. The quartermasters track ammunition, food supplies, and expected casualty rates with identical precision, treating warrior mortality as predictable overhead in the business of organised violence. Your name appears on spreadsheets next to numbers that estimate how many battles you'll survive. The armour you wear was manufactured by craftsmen who receive bonus payments for each piece that comes back blood-stained, proving its effectiveness in combat. Your sword was forged by a smith who maintains detailed records of how many enemies his blades have killed, using death statistics as marketing materials for future customers. Even your weapons profit from your violence. Your horse knows nothing about economics, but his care and feeding costs more per day than your entire family receives in monthly rice allowances. The animal represents a significant capital investment that must be protected, while you represent a renewable resource that can be replaced from the endless supply of young men trained from childhood to die beautifully. If the horse dies, it's a financial loss. If you die, it's a tax write-off. The enemy samurai you'll face tomorrow are fighting for identical economic reasons, serving lords who borrowed money from the same Kyoto banks to fund opposing sides of the same profitable conflict. The financiers win regardless of which army claims victory, collecting interest payments written in blood from warriors who die to service other people's debts. Your death will generate paperwork that travels through 3 different government offices, each collecting administrative fees for processing warrior mortality documentation. The bureaucrats who stamp your death certificate earn more from your dying than your family received from your living, transforming tragedy into revenue streams for civil servants who never hold weapons. Military merchants follow armies like vultures, selling equipment to both sides while maintaining careful neutrality that preserves business relationships regardless of political outcomes. They provide swords to kill with and bandages to treat the wounds, selling death and healing with equal enthusiasm to customers who can afford both. The rice that feeds your last meal was purchased at wartime prices inflated by speculators who manipulate food markets during conflicts. Your final hunger generates profits for commodity traders who bet on warrior appetites the same way they wager on weather patterns. Even starvation becomes someone else's business opportunity. Your lord's strategic planning includes calculations about how many samurai he can afford to lose while maintaining domain productivity after the war ends. The optimal outcome involves eliminating enough warriors to reduce payroll expenses without compromising agricultural supervision or tax collection capabilities. Your survival is factored as an unwanted variable in post-war economic planning. The letters you write to your family pass through. Postal system that charge premium rates during wartime, exploiting emotional desperation to increase shipping revenues. Your final words cost more to deliver than most people earn in a week, turning grief into a luxury service that profits from impending loss. What happens when human courage becomes a commodity and warrior honor transforms into investment strategy? The battlefield economy operates on principles that would make modern corporations envious. Every piece of equipment stripped from dead warriors enters immediate resale markets, where merchants bid on blood-stained armour before the bodies finish cooling. Your grandfather's sword, inherited through 5 generations and blessed by Shinto priests, will be in someone else's hands before sunset, sold to the highest bidder by scavengers who follow armies like cleanup crews. Professional corpse robbers work both sides of every conflict, maintaining strict neutrality that allows them to strip valuable items from friend and enemy alike. These entrepreneurs develop sophisticated techniques for quickly assessing the resale value of dying men's possessions, creating informal stock exchanges where human lives get converted into liquid assets before the blood dries. The medical corps exists primarily to salvage recoverable warriors rather than provide humanitarian care. Their treatment priority is determined by economic calculations about rehabilitation costs versus replacement expenses. Samurai with expensive training receive better medical attention than common foot soldiers, while warriors whose injuries make them permanently useless face abandonment disguised as honourable discharge. Listen to the sound of your own laboured breathing, mixing with the distant haggling of merchants who are already negotiating prices for your possessions while you're still using them. Your death rattle becomes background music for commercial transactions, your final moments transformed into business opportunities for people who view battlefields as outdoor shopping centres. Your lord's war chest contains detailed actuarial tables that predict casualty rates with insurance company precision, allowing him to budget for specific numbers of dead samurai across different types of combat scenarios. The calculations include seasonal variations in mortality, weather-related death rate fluctuations, and statistical correlations between warrior age and battlefield survival probability. Enemy commanders exchange intelligence about warrior casualties through networks of merchant spies who sell military information to all parties simultaneously. These double agents profit from prolonging conflicts by providing enough accurate intelligence to keep both sides competitive while withholding crucial details that might allow either army to achieve decisive victory. The religious ceremonies performed over dead warriors generate revenue for Bloodiest monks, who charge premium fees for battlefield blessing services. These priests develop specialized liturgies for mass casualties, offering bulk discount rates for multiple warrior deaths, and express funeral services that accommodate the rapid turnover of military campaigns. Your personal effects will be inventoried by clerks who specialize in estate liquidation for deceased samurai, their expertise including techniques for forging documentation that increases the apparent value of confiscated possessions. These administrators profit from warrior deaths by skimming percentages of estate auctions, while providing fake certificates of authenticity for items with fabricated historical provenance. The horses that carry dead warriors from battlefields are owned by commercial transportation companies that contract with military forces to provide corpse removal services. These businesses charge by the body weight and distance travelled, creating incentives to stack dead samurai efficiently while minimising transportation costs that cut into profit margins. Military engineers design fortifications with specific consideration for how warrior corpses will affect siege economics, calculating the costs of removing dead defenders versus the psychological impact of leaving bodies visible as defensive deterrents. Dead samurai become construction materials in strategies that treat human remains as tactical resources. Your final battle cry will be recorded by military historians who sell detailed combat accounts to noble families of all, seeking to glorify their ancestors' deaths through expensive commemorative chronicles. These writers specialize in transforming actual horror into noble narratives, charging premium fees for converting graphic warrior deaths into inspiring literary products. The sake that warriors drink before battle is provided by brewers who increase alcohol content during wartime to improve combat performance while raising prices to exploit the captive military market. Liquid courage becomes a luxury commodity priced according to demand from men who know they're about to die. Even your final prayers generate revenue for religious institutions that charge warriors for pre-battle spiritual services, confession opportunities and last-minute salvation packages designed to extract maximum payment from men facing imminent death. Terror becomes a target market for spiritual entrepreneurs. The aftermath of your death creates a complex economic ecosystem that continues generating profits long after your final breath. Professional mourners are hired to attend your funeral, their theatrical grief performances priced according to the social status your family is desperate to maintain despite financial ruin. These emotional entrepreneurs specialize in manufacturing authentic-looking sorrow for audiences who judge family honor by the quality of purchased tears. Your widow faces immediate pressure from debt collectors who claim portions of your military salary were advances against future service that your death left unfulfilled. The financial predators arrive at funeral ceremonies with legal documents demanding repayment of money you never received, transforming grief into negotiation sessions where mourning families must bargain for the right to bury their dead. The military pension system operates as a sophisticated pyramid scheme where current warrior salaries fund death benefits for previously deceased samurai, requiring constant recruitment of new soldiers to maintain cash flow for payments to families of the already fallen. Your death helps fund someone else's widow while future deaths will theoretically support your own family's survival. Listen to the sound of your memorial tablet being carved by craftsmen who charge premium prices for superior calligraphy during peak mourning seasons, their workshops operating like factories that mass-produce remembrance during wartime when demand for death commemoration overwhelms supply. Even your name becomes a luxury product priced according to market conditions. Your son's inheritance consists primarily of debts disguised as honor, including obligations to repay loans your lord used to fund the campaign that killed you. The boy inherits your social status, along with financial responsibilities that will consume his entire life, ensuring that your death generates revenue streams that span multiple generations. Genealogy merchants specialize in creating fake family histories for the descendants of disgraced warriors, offering services that transform shameful deaths into heroic legends through documentary forgery and witness testimony purchased from professional liars. Your family's reputation becomes a commodity that can be manufactured and sold like any other product. The rice fields you died protecting are immediately leased to agricultural corporations that maximize crop yields through peasant labor exploitation, generating higher profits than the traditional paternalistic management your family practiced for generations. Your death enables agricultural modernization that treats human workers as replaceable machinery. Military recruitment officers target your younger brothers with promises of avenging your death while concealing the economic calculations that ensure their own eventual sacrifice. These professionals specialize in converting grief into enlistment, transforming family tragedy into recruitment opportunities that replenish the supply of expendable warriors. Your armor gets melted down and reforged into agricultural tools sold to the same peasants who will work the lands confiscated from your family, creating cycles where your military equipment becomes farming implements for people who benefit from your destruction. The metal that protected you in life enables your family's economic replacement after death. War contractors provide specialized services for disposing of large quantities of dead samurai efficiently, developing techniques for mass cremation that minimize fuel costs while maximizing throughput. These entrepreneurs treat warrior corpses like industrial waste, charging removal fees while harvesting valuable materials from the human remains. Your family shrine requires ongoing maintenance payments to Buddhist temples that exploit grief through subscription-based memorial services, creating perpetual revenue streams from families desperate to honor their dead. Religious institutions develop sophisticated financing programs that keep bereaved families in spiritual debt for decades. The regional economy actually improves following your death and the deaths of hundreds of other samurai, as the elimination of warrior salaries and the confiscation of military estates generates surplus capital that gets invested in commercial development. Your sacrifice enables economic growth that specifically benefits from warrior extinction. Even your death poem becomes intellectual property owned by poets who specialize in purchasing last words from dying warriors, then reselling these final expressions as inspiration for commercial literature. Your ultimate spiritual expression transforms into content for entertainment products, consumed by people who romanticize the suffering they're too comfortable to experience. The final calculation reveals the system's ultimate cynicism. Your death creates approximately 10 times more economic value than your life ever generated, making warrior mortality more profitable than warrior survival for everyone except the warriors themselves. The temple where samurai come to die has been designed with the same aesthetic principles as flower arrangement, every element positioned to create perfect visual harmony during ritual suicide. The white gravel courtyard, raked in patterns that suggest flowing water, provides a pristine backdrop for the crimson sprays that will soon decorate its geometric perfection. Blood becomes the final artistic element in compositions planned by monks who understand that death is performance art for audiences who pay admission fees. You kneel on a platform specifically constructed to display suicide victims at optimal viewing angles, its height calculated to ensure witnesses can observe facial expressions during disembowelment while maintaining respectful distance from arterial spray patterns. The wooden surface, polished to mirror smoothness, reflects your face back at you while absorbing the blood that will soon pour from your opened abdomen. Listen to the sound of water trickling through bamboo fountains designed to provide soothing auditory camouflage for the wet sounds of ritual disembowelment. Their gentle splashing carefully calibrated to mask gurgling, gasping, and the distinctive whistle of air escaping through severed windpipes. The garden's peaceful ambience transforms human death rattles into environmental music for spiritual tourism. The cherry trees surrounding the suicide platform were planted specifically to provide falling petals during the peak ritual season. They're blooming, schedule manipulated through careful cultivation to ensure optimal aesthetic conditions for warrior deaths. The pink blossoms that drift onto your white kimono aren't natural coincidence. They are horticultural special effects designed to enhance the visual poetry of your suffering. Specialized craftsmen build suicide daggers according to aesthetic specifications that prioritize beautiful wounds over efficient killing. Their blade geometry is designed to create clean cuts that bleed dramatically without causing immediate unconsciousness. The weapons are art objects first, murder tools second, their decorative elements more expensive than their functional components. Your white death kimono, Woven from silk that costs more than most families earn in a year, will be carefully positioned after your suicide to create pleasing fabric arrangements around your corpse. Professional kimono arrangers work with funeral directors to ensure that your dead body creates satisfying compositions for the photographers who document ritual suicides for commercial art collections. The stones in the meditation garden are arranged according to principles borrowed from landscape architecture, their placement designed to create contemplative spaces where visitors can appreciate the beauty of warrior death, while enjoying expensive tea and purchasing memorial gifts from temple shops. Suicide venues operate as aesthetic experiences that generate tourism revenue from death appreciation. Incense burners release fragrances specifically blended to complement the smell of fresh blood. They're aromatic combinations designed to transform the metallic scent of massive hemorrhaging into the pleasant olfactory experiences for spectators who attend ritual suiciders as cultural entertainment. Death becomes aromatherapy for people who collect exotic sensory experiences. The viewing pavilion for witnesses includes comfortable seating, with optimal sight lines to suicide platforms, cushions positioned to provide maximum comfort during the lengthy ceremonies that surround warrior death rituals. The architecture treats spectators as customers whose comfort must be maintained throughout entertainment programming that happens to involve human suffering. Professional death poets attend suicide ceremonies to compose verses inspired by warrior suffering. Their literary products immediately available for purchase by spectators seeking to commemorate the beautiful deaths they've witnessed. These writers develop standardized metaphors for various types of fatal wounds, creating poetry assembly lines that manufacture inspiration from authentic agony. The temple gift shop stocks memorial items related to famous samurai suicides, offering miniature replica daggers, silk scarves printed with death poems, and ceramic bowls designed to resemble the vessels used to collect severed heads during kaishaku ceremonies. Tourism infrastructure transforms human tragedy into purchasable memorabilia. Apprentice. Monks practice suicide ceremony coordination through elaborate rehearsals using condemned criminals as practice victims, developing professional expertise in timing, positioning, and crowd management that ensures ritual deaths proceed smoothly for paying audiences. Death becomes theatre requiring technical precision and stage management skills. The final aesthetic consideration involves preservation techniques that maintain corpse appearance for extended viewing periods, allowing temple visitors to appreciate dead warriors' facial expressions days after suicide ceremonies conclude. Your death mask becomes permanent artwork displayed in galleries where admission fees fund further death appreciation programming. What happens when human suffering becomes indistinguishable from artistic achievement and murder transforms into cultural sophistication? The suicide preparation ritual begins weeks before your actual death, involving elaborate purification ceremonies that transform killing yourself into spiritual achievement worthy of professional documentation. Temple servants bathe you in water, blessed by priests who charge premium fees for death preparation services. They're holy ablutions designed to cleanse both your body and your family's bank account before the final ceremony. Your final meal, carefully designed according to aesthetic principles that prioritize visual presentation over nutritional value, consists of foods arranged to symbolize the transience of life while costing enough to bankrupt most families. The white rice represents purity, the red fish suggests blood, and the precise placement of each item creates symbolic compositions that will be photographed for art books about beautiful death. Listen to the sound of silk rustling as specialized dressers arrange your suicide kimono according to traditional patterns that have been commercialized into fashion statements. Their fabric manipulation techniques designed to ensure optimal blood absorption while maintaining visual elegance throughout your dying process. Your clothing becomes costume design for performances that end in actual death. Professional makeup artists apply cosmetics designed to enhance your facial expressions during suicide, using techniques borrowed from theatrical traditions to ensure that your agony creates photogenic images suitable for memorial publications. Your suffering gets edited in real time by beauty experts who understand that dying attractively requires the same skills as living attractively. The dagger ceremony involves presenting you with multiple weapon options, each blade designed for different types of aesthetic wounds that create varying visual effects during suicide performances, Curved daggers produce flowing blood patterns, straight blades create geometric incisions, and serrated edges generate textured wounds that photograph dramatically under appropriate lighting conditions. Your death poem undergoes professional editing by literary consultants who specialise in final words optimization. Their expertise, including techniques for maximizing emotional impact while maintaining traditional syllable counts required for authentic haiku composition. Even your ultimate spiritual expression becomes collaborative writing between you and commercial poets. Witness seating assignments follow strict protocols that ensure optimal viewing experiences for spectators who have paid different admission fees, with premium positions reserved for patrons who contribute substantial donations to temple renovation projects. Your suicide becomes entertainment programming with pricing tiers that accommodate various economic demographics. The kaishaku who will perform your mercy stroke practices, his technique using watermelons, and condemned criminals, developing muscle memory that ensures clean decapitation while maintaining theatrical timing that maximizes dramatic impact for paying audiences. Your executioner trains like an athlete preparing for Olympic competition in ritualized murder. Temple musicians provide live accompaniment during suicide ceremonies, their shamisen and flute performances designed to complement the rhythm of your breathing and the timing of your blade work. The soundtracks to warrior deaths become recording opportunities for musicians who specialize in death-adjacent performance art. Flower arrangers position seasonal blooms around suicide platforms, according to aesthetic principles that treat your dying body as the central element in an elaborate ikebana compositions. Their botanical artistry designed to frame human suffering within natural beauty that suggests spiritual transcendence through self-destruction. The blood collection vessels used during your suicide are crafted by ceramic artists who specialize in functional pottery for ritual death. Their bowl designs optimized for efficient hemoglobin drainage while maintaining visual elegance, suitable for permanent display in temple museums. Your blood becomes art supply for crafts projects. Photography equipment operators document suicide ceremonies using techniques borrowed from portrait photography, their lighting arrangements and camera angles designed to capture your dying expressions with artistic quality suitable for commercial publication in memorial art collections that sell death appreciation to affluent consumers. Professional embalmers preserve suicide victims using chemical processes that maintain corpse appearance for extended exhibition periods, their preservation techniques allowing temple visitors to appreciate dead warriors' facial expressions weeks after ceremony completion. Your death mask becomes permanent sculpture in galleries dedicated to beautiful dying. The suicide tourism industry has evolved into a sophisticated commercial enterprise that packages warrior death as luxury spiritual experience for wealthy patrons seeking authentic cultural immersion through witnessing human suffering. Travel. Agencies offer comprehensive suicide viewing packages that include premium seating, traditional meals, souvenir shopping, and professional photography services that document guests' reactions to authentic warrior deaths. Your suicide has been scheduled to coincide with cherry blossom season, maximizing ticket sales to international visitors who pay premium prices for aesthetic experiences that combine natural beauty with human tragedy. The timing isn't spiritual. It's marketing strategy designed to create Instagram-worthy moments that attract social media influencers seeking content opportunities and exotic death appreciation. Listen to the sound of foreign languages mixing with traditional Japanese prayers as international spectators photograph your final moments using professional camera equipment, their documentation techniques treating your suicide as artistic performance worthy of gallery exhibition in cultural centers that specialize in selling Asian spiritual experiences to Western consumers. The temple has developed subscription services for regular suicide attendees, offering annual passes that provide unlimited access to warrior death ceremonies along with exclusive behind-the-scenes tours of preparation areas where tourists can observe makeup application, weapon selection, and corpse preservation techniques. Death becomes membership programming for affluent hobbyists. Your family receives percentage commissions from suicide tourism revenue, creating financial incentives that transform warrior honor into entertainment industry profit-sharing arrangements. The more dramatically you die, the higher your relatives' compensation, turning final agony into performance bonuses that reward spectacular self-destruction. Professional suicide consultants offer training programs for warriors seeking to maximize their death's commercial value, teaching techniques for dramatic timing, optimal vocal expressions during disembowelment, and facial expression management that creates photogenic agony suitable for tourist photography. Even dying becomes a skill requiring professional development. The temple gift shop stocks items manufactured specifically for suicide tourism, including miniature replica suicide platforms, ceramic blood collection bowls, and silk scarves printed with famous death poems. These souvenirs allow visitors to take home physical reminders of human suffering they've witnessed as entertainment programming. Medical professionals attend suicide ceremonies not to provide emergency care, but to offer expert commentary for tourist groups seeking educational value from their death appreciation experiences. These doctors explain the physiological processes of ritual disembowelment while maintaining clinical detachment that transforms human suffering into academic content. Your suicide will be broadcast live through temple streaming services that sell global access to authentic warrior deaths, their online platforms generating subscription revenue from international audiences seeking convenient access to Japanese death culture without travel expenses. Digital distribution makes human suffering available as on-demand entertainment. The regional government provides tax incentives for suicide tourism development, recognizing warrior deaths as valuable cultural exports that generate foreign currency through death appreciation programming. Public policy supports commercializing human suffering as economic development strategy for regions seeking to monetize traditional culture. Restaurant chains have developed themed dining experiences that serve traditional suicide ceremony meals to tourists, their menus designed to provide authentic cultural immersion through consuming the same foods warriors eat before killing themselves. Death becomes dinner theatre for cultural tourists seeking exotic dining experiences. Hotel chains offer suicide ceremony viewing packages that include transportation, premium seating, professional photography, and commemorative dining experiences, their hospitality services treating warrior deaths as tourist attractions comparable to natural landmarks or historical monuments. Human suffering becomes vacation programming. The final reveal exposes the complete corruption of what was once sacred. Your honourable death has become a product in global entertainment markets, where human suffering generates revenue for industries that profit from packaging authentic tragedy as luxury cultural experiences for consumers who collect exotic death appreciation as lifestyle accessories. Your suicide isn't spiritual achievement, it's content creation for audiences who transform other people's authentic agony into their own aesthetic pleasure, purchasing admission to witness human destruction while remaining safely insulated from the suffering they consume as entertainment. Your 5-year-old grandson sits motionless in the meditation hall, his tiny legs folded beneath him in Caesar position, while tears stream silently down his cheeks. The child hasn't moved for 3 hours, despite the excruciating pain shooting through his limbs, because moving would dishonor his grandfather's memory and prove that your bloodline produces weak warriors unworthy of the samurai tradition you died to preserve. The training masters who inherited responsibility for your family's surviving children have developed specialized techniques for transforming grief into obedience, using your suicide as educational material that teaches young warriors how beautiful death should look when properly executed. Your grandson studies detailed paintings of your disembowelment, learning to appreciate the artistic elements of ritual suicide through repeated exposure to graphic depictions of family suffering. Listen to the sound of children reciting multiplication tables that calculate death before life. How many cuts constitute proper seppuku? Optimal blade angles for maximum blood flow. Precise timing required for ki shaku mercy strokes. Mathematics education for samurai children includes computational skills for measuring suffering, transforming arithmetic lessons into preparations for eventual self-destruction. The dormitory where your grandson sleeps contains 43 other children whose fathers died in the same campaign that killed you, their collective trauma carefully managed through institutional programming that converts individual grief into group identity, centered around honoring dead parents through perfect replication of their suicidal choices. Orphaned children become raw materials for manufacturing the next generation of willing victims. Your grandson's daily schedule includes mandatory viewing sessions where children watch live suicide ceremonies performed by current warriors, Their young minds systematically desensitized to human suffering through repeated exposure to ritualized death presented as spiritual achievement worthy of emulation. Childhood development gets redirected toward producing adults who view self-murder as aspirational behavior. The educational curriculum eliminates subjects that might develop independent thinking or emotional intelligence, focusing exclusively on military techniques, loyalty programming, and suicide preparation skills that ensure graduates will replicate the same tragic choices that destroyed their parents. Learning becomes indoctrination designed to perpetuate cycles of self-destruction across generations. Your daughter-in-law, widowed at 19, works in the temple kitchens for survival wages, while her son undergoes warrior programming, her own trauma carefully ignored by institutional systems that view women's suffering as irrelevant background noise to the serious business of manufacturing male weapons from traumatized children. Maternal grief becomes externalized costs in educational systems focused on producing expendable warriors. Professional child psychologists, though that term wouldn't exist for centuries, work within the training system to identify and eliminate emotional responses that might interfere with absolute obedience to authority figures. These specialists develop techniques for breaking parent-child attachment bonds that could create competing loyalties, challenging institutional control over young minds. The surviving children compete for resources and attention through demonstrations of their willingness to suffer, creating social dynamics where young warriors earn approval by enduring increasingly severe punishment without complaint. Childhood friendships form around shared capacity for self-inflicted pain, bonding through mutual traumatization rather than healthy emotional development. Your grandson's letters home are censored by institutional monitors who edit out any expressions of homesickness, fear, or normal or childhood or emotional needs, ensuring that communication with surviving family members reinforces loyalty programming rather than maintaining human connections that might interfere with warrior conditioning. Even private thoughts become institutional property subject to editorial control. The temple operates a breeding program disguised as marriage arrangements, pairing traumatized young warriors with equally conditioned women to produce children who inherit both genetic predispositions toward obedience and environmental conditioning that shapes psychological development from birth. Human reproduction becomes livestock management focused on producing superior weapons. Medical care for training injuries focuses exclusively on maintaining physical functionality, while completely ignoring psychological damage that might compromise future military utility. Broken bones receive treatment. Broken spirits get training reinforcement designed to eliminate emotional weakness through additional traumatization. Your grandson will graduate at 16 with expert skills in sword work, absolute loyalty to authority figures, and complete emotional numbness that makes him incapable of forming healthy relationships or making independent moral decisions. The child you loved becomes a human weapon programmed for self-destruction, manufactured through systematic abuse disguised as honor education. The psychological engineering required to transform traumatized children into willing suicide victims operates through sophisticated manipulation techniques that exploit natural grief responses while redirecting mourning energy toward institutional loyalty. Your grandson's tears for his dead father become raw material for manufacturing unconditional obedience to the same system that killed his parent. Institutional therapists, working centuries before therapy becomes a recognized profession, develop specialized techniques for converting survivor guilt into warrior motivation. Teaching traumatized children that honoring dead parents requires replicating their suicidal choices rather than learning from their tragic mistakes. Grief counseling becomes suicide recruitment disguised as psychological support. Listen to the sound of children's voices reciting loyalty oaths that promise to die exactly as their fathers died, their young words binding them to repeat family trauma as expressions of filial devotion. The institutional programming transforms love for dead parents into legal contracts requiring self-destruction, making suicide a hereditary obligation passed between generations like genetic disease. Your grandson learns to write death poems before he masters basic literacy. His childhood artistic expression focused exclusively on composing beautiful final words that will accompany his eventual suicide. Creative writing exercises become rehearsals for self-murder, with teachers grading students based on the aesthetic quality of their planned dying rather than the health of their living. The training includes systematic desensitization protocols that gradually increase children's tolerance for witnessing and experiencing violence, beginning with animal slaughter and progressing through human torture until young warriors can watch friends disembowel themselves without emotional response. Empathy gets surgically removed through carefully orchestrated exposure to escalating cruelty. Social relationships within the institution are carefully managed to prevent the formation of deep emotional bonds that might create competing loyalties challenging absolute devotion to authority figures. Children learn to view friendship as weakness, emotional attachment as spiritual corruption, and human connection as dangerous distraction from warrior duties. Your grandson's education includes detailed study of your suicide, with instructors using your death as case study material that demonstrates proper technique, appropriate emotional responses, and aesthetic considerations for beautiful ritual self-murder. Your final moments become teaching materials for programming your own descendant to replicate your choices. The dietary regimen for training children includes deliberate nutritional deficiencies that impair cognitive development while maintaining physical functionality, creating young warriors whose reduced mental capacity makes them more susceptible to institutional programming and less capable of critical thinking that might challenge authority. Sleep deprivation protocols ensure that developing minds remain in states of chronic stresses that increase susceptibility to psychological manipulation while reducing capacity for independent judgment. Exhausted children accept institutional programming more readily than well-rested students who might retain enough mental clarity to question the system destroying them. The institution operates punishment systems that reward children for self-inflicted suffering while providing no positive reinforcement for healthy behaviours, creating psychological conditioning that makes young warriors associate pleasure with pain and achievement with self-destruction. Normal childhood development gets replaced with systematic self-harm training. Your grandson will be taught that questioning institutional authority represents betrayal of your memory, making independent thought emotionally equivalent to dishonouring his dead father. Critical thinking becomes psychological treason against family legacy, ensuring that intellectual development gets stunted through emotional manipulation. Professional evaluators monitor children's psychological development to identify and eliminate any remaining capacity for independent moral reasoning, with students who show signs of ethical thinking receiving additional conditioning designed to destroy their ability to distinguish right from wrong based on anything other than institutional commands. The final stage of psychological programming involves induced trauma bonding between students and their instructors, creating emotional dependencies that make young warriors psychologically incapable of disobeying authority figures who represent the only source of approval and acceptance in their carefully controlled world. 20 years after your suicide, your grandson kneels in the same temple where you died, holding the same type of ceremonial dagger that opened your abdomen, preparing to complete the cycle of inherited self-destruction that began with your own conditioned choice. The institutional programming has succeeded completely. Your descendant genuinely believes that killing himself honours your memory rather than perpetuating the system that murdered you both. His suicide note, written in calligraphy that perfectly replicates your final poem's aesthetic style, expresses gratitude for the opportunity to join you in death while completely failing to recognise that his choice represents systematic child abuse disguised as spiritual education. 20 years of psychological conditioning have produced a young man incapable of understanding that love doesn't require repetition of family trauma. Listen to the sound of your grandson's final breathing, identical to your own death rattle 2 decades earlier, as institutional witnesses observe another successful product of their educational system destroying himself according to programming installed during childhood. The cycle completes itself with mechanical precision, confirming that trauma can be manufactured and inherited like any other family tradition. The temple where both generations died has become a profitable tourist destination specifically because of your family's repeated suicides, with visitors paying premium admission fees to witness authentic hereditary self-destruction performed by actual trauma victims rather than actors. Your bloodline has become a commercial brand in death tourism markets. Your great-grandson, now 5 years old, sits in the audience watching his father disembowel himself, his young mind recording images that will be processed through the same institutional programming that shaped his father's psychological development. The system has identified its next victim and begun conditioning him for eventual suicide through exposure to family death traditions. the institutional educators responsible for manufacturing. 3 generations of suicidal warriors have refined their techniques through practical experience, developing increasingly sophisticated methods for converting traumatized children into willing weapons while maintaining plausible deniability about the systematic abuse required to produce such psychological destruction. Your family's genetic line will continue for several more generations, each member programmed from childhood to replicate the same tragic choices through educational systems that exploit natural love between parents and children to perpetuate cycles of institutional profit generated through hereditary self-destruction. The economic benefits of hereditary suicide extend far beyond individual temple revenues, creating regional tourism industries, craftsman specializations, and professional services that depend on reliable supplies of traumatized warriors willing to kill themselves for public entertainment. Your family's destruction enables entire economic ecosystems. The final accounting reveals the complete success of intergenerational trauma programming. Your suicide didn't honour anything or preserve any meaningful tradition. It simply demonstrated the effectiveness of systematic child abuse in producing adults who will voluntarily destroy themselves while believing their choices represent spiritual achievement rather than psychological conditioning. Your death created more death. Your suffering generated more suffering, and your family's destruction became self-perpetuating through institutional systems designed to convert individual tragedy into renewable revenue streams. The cycle continues because the system requires constant supplies of willing victims to maintain profitability. The children watching your grandson's suicide today will receive the same programming that shaped his choices, ensuring that this inherited trauma continues flowing through generations until someone finally recognizes that love means breaking cycles of destruction rather than perpetuating them through beautiful repetition of family mistakes. But that recognition would require questioning institutional authority, challenging traditional wisdom, and prioritizing children's welfare over cultural preservation, choices that the same educational system has systematically programmed out of its victims' psychological capabilities. You discover the truth in the most mundane place possible, a sake merchant's accounting ledger left open on a table in a roadside inn. The pages detail financial arrangements between regional daimyo and Kyoto moneylenders, listing samurai deaths as collateral for military loans, with the same casual precision used for recording rice shipments and horse purchases. Your honour has a price, and it's surprisingly low. The numbers tell a story your education never prepared you to understand. The campaign that killed your father was funded by merchant banks who provided upfront capital in exchange for the guaranteed casualty rates that would eliminate warrior salaries and free up agricultural land for commercial development. Your family's destruction was a line item in someone else's business plan, carefully calculated to generate maximum return on investment. Listen to the sound of coins being counted in the merchant's strongbox, while you read documentation of your own pending death, each metallic clink representing warrior lives converted into transferable wealth by financial systems that treat human courage as a commodity to be harvested rather than honoured. Your sacrifice has already been purchased by people who will never hold swords. The ledger includes detailed breakdowns of suicide ceremony costs, with itemised expenses for platform construction, witness seating, ceremonial daggers, silk kimonos and disposal services. Even your ritual death has been budgeted down to individual incense sticks, transforming spiritual transcendence into event planning, with profit margins calculated to ensure maximum efficiency in converting suffering into entertainment. A separate section documents insurance policies purchased by lords who bet against their own samurai's survival, creating financial incentives for commanders to deploy warriors in situations guaranteed to result in death. Your loyalty is being systematically monetized by people who profit more from your dying than your living, making your honour a liability to the very people you've sworn to serve. The merchant's correspondence reveals coordination between supposedly opposing daimyo, who secretly collaborate to maintain profitable conflicts that eliminate excess warrior populations, while generating revenue through weapon sales, supply contracts and reconstruction services. Your enemies aren't your lord's rivals, they are his business partners. Regional economic reports detail how samurai extinction improves agricultural productivity by eliminating feudal obligations that prevented efficient land exploitation, with your deaths enabling agricultural modernization that treats peasants as disposable machinery rather than people deserving paternalistic protection. Honor becomes an obstacle to profitable farming. The documentation includes market analysis reports that track samurai suicide rates like commodity prices, with financial speculators betting on warrior mortality trends the same way they wager on rice harvests and silk production. Your willingness to die beautifully has become a tradable asset in markets you don't even know exist. Professional war contractors advertise services for conflict management designed to eliminate specific numbers of warriors while maintaining plausible deniability about intentional casualty creation, their marketing materials promising efficient population reduction disguised as honourable military campaigns. Murder has been outsourced to specialists who optimise killing for profit. The ledger reveals that your education was paid for by the same banks that profit from your death. Their investment in warrior training programs designed to produce reliably suicidal graduates who will destroy themselves on command while believing their choices represent spiritual achievement. Your conditioning was a commercial project with measurable returns. Temple financial records show that suicide ceremony revenues fund expansion programs designed to accommodate increased warrior death tourism, with temple construction projects planned around projected increases in samurai self-destruction rates. Religious institutions have become death factories disguised as spiritual centres. The final entry documents projected profits from your specific suicide, including estimated tourist attendance, souvenir sales, photography, fees, and commemorative publication revenues. Your individual death has been pre-sold to markets you'll never see, your suffering already converted into other people's luxury purchases. What happens when you realise that everything you've believed about honour, loyalty, and warrior virtue was manufactured specifically to make you willing to die for other people's profit? The Merchant's Correspondence folder contains letters from government officials who coordinate samurai elimination quotas with economic planning departments, their bureaucratic language treating warrior deaths as administrative objectives rather than human tragedies. Your suicide isn't spiritual achievement. It's meeting production targets set by civil servants who view human lives as renewable resources requiring periodic harvesting. Regional taxation records reveal that samurai families pay premium rates for the privilege of serving lords who profit from their destruction, with warrior households providing both military service and financial support for the same institutions that systematically eliminate them. You're paying for your own execution through taxes that fund the weapons used to kill you. Listen to the sound of bureaucratic stamps approving death quotas while you read documentation of systematic population management programs designed to maintain optimal ratios between warrior populations and agricultural productivity. Human resource planning treats samurai like livestock whose numbers must be controlled through regular culling disguised as honourable military campaigns. The correspondence includes detailed psychological profiles of successful suicide victims, with institutional researchers analysing personality traits that make warriors more susceptible to self-destruction programming. Your individual psychology has been studied and catalogued by people who develop techniques for manufacturing willing victims through targeted emotional manipulation. Economic forecasting reports project future warrior elimination schedules coordinated with agricultural development timelines, ensuring that samurai deaths coincide with land redistribution programs that transfer feudal estates to commercial enterprises. Your honour schedule aligns with someone else's business calendar. Professional training manuals for suicide ceremony coordinators include technical specifications for optimising warrior death experiences to maximise tourist satisfaction while minimising operational costs. Your spiritual transcendence has been reduced to customer service protocols designed to ensure repeat business from death appreciation audiences. The documentation reveals that your lord borrowed money against projected warrior casualties using anticipated samurai deaths as collateral for loans that fund luxury purchases and political bribes. Your future suicide was mortgaged before you were born, making your life valuable only insofar as your death generates loan repayment capability. Military supplier contracts include bonus payment structures that reward equipment manufacturers for producing weapons that increase warrior mortality rates while maintaining aesthetic standards required for tourism markets. Your death becomes quality control feedback for craftsmen who optimize their products for efficient killing, disguised as artistic expression. Research reports from temple psychology departments detail experimental techniques for conditioning children to desire suicide. with institutional scientists testing various trauma induction methods to identify optimal approaches for manufacturing reliably self-destructive adults. Your nephew is a test subject in experiments designed to perfect human weapon production. The merchant's banking records show that your family's debts were deliberately structured to require multiple generations of service, ensuring that children and grandchildren inherit financial obligations that can only be resolved through military service leading to eventual suicide. Economic slavery has been disguised as hereditary honor. International trade agreements include provisions for exporting samurai suicide expertise to foreign markets, with Japanese institutions offering consulting services for establishing warrior death tourism industries in other countries. Your cultural tradition is being franchised as a commercial product for global entertainment markets. The final revelation appears in insurance documents that list your specific personality traits as risk factors affecting your value as a suicide investment, with actuarial calculations predicting your death date based on psychological profiles developed through lifetime surveillance of your behavior patterns. Your entire existence has been data collection for algorithms that optimize human destruction. The merchant's secret compartment contains the master planning documents that reveal the ultimate scope of systematic samurai elimination, a multi-generational program designed to completely destroy the warrior class while preserving the illusion of honor-based suicide to maintain social control over the remaining population. Your entire culture is being systematically murdered through its own value system. Government communications detail coordination between regional authorities and foreign advisors who provide expertise in population control through cultural manipulation, their consultation fees paid from taxes collected from the same samurai families being systematically eliminated. International specialists are being paid to optimize your people's destruction using your own money. Listen to the sound of foreign languages mixing with Japanese in planning sessions where colonial administrators share techniques for destroying indigenous warrior cultures through psychological manipulation disguised as cultural preservation. Your tradition is being murdered by people who study it like anthropologists studying insects. The documentation includes psychological warfare manuals that describe samurai honor as a cultural vulnerability that can be exploited for political control, with specific techniques for manipulating warrior psychology to produce self-destructive behaviors that eliminate resistance while appearing voluntary. Your greatest strength has been identified as your greatest weakness. Regional development plans outline post-samurai economic systems that require complete warrior extinction to implement agricultural modernization and commercial development programs funded by international investors. Your death enables colonial economic transformation that will benefit everyone except the people being eliminated to make it possible. The correspondence reveals that your education was designed by foreign pedagogical experts who specialize in manufacturing compliant populations through childhood trauma programming, their consulting fees representing return on investment in human resource optimization. Your conditioning was designed by people who view you as livestock requiring management. Medical research documents detail experiments conducted on samurai families to identify genetic and psychological factors that influence suicide susceptibility, with test results used to optimize population elimination efficiency while maintaining plausible deniability about systematic murder. Your bloodline is being studied like laboratory animals. The merchant's trading contracts include provisions for selling samurai cultural artifacts to international collectors, with your family's possessions already pre-sold to foreign museums that will display your heritage as examples of extinct barbaric traditions. Your culture is being preserved only as evidence of its own primitive inferiority. Professional training programs for cultural destruction specialists include modules on samurai psychology, traditional values, and social structures, with graduates deployed to accelerate warrior elimination through targeted cultural manipulation. Experts are being trained specifically to destroy you more efficiently. The master plan's timeline projects complete samurai extinction within 50 years, followed by cultural re-education programs that will teach surviving Japanese populations to view warrior traditions as embarrassing remnants of feudal barbarism. Your honor will be remembered as historical mental illness. Final accounting documents reveal that the entire samurai elimination program is profitable enough to fund similar cultural destruction projects in other countries, with Japanese warrior annihilation serving as a pilot program for systematic elimination of indigenous resistance cultures worldwide. Your death enables the murder of warriors you'll never meet. The ultimate revelation appears in personal letters between program administrators who express genuine surprise at how easily samurai can be manipulated into enthusiastic self-destruction through appeals to honor and tradition. Your deepest values are being used as weapons against you by people who view your sincerity as evidence of dente, intellectual inferiority. The merchant himself enters the room as you finish reading, his face showing no surprise at your discovery. "You understand now," he says quietly. "The question is, what will you do with this knowledge in Blood?" Your hand moves toward your sword, but stops. Killing the messenger won't change the message. The system that created you has systematically destroyed your ability to respond effectively to this information. You've been programmed too thoroughly to break your conditioning, even when confronted with proof of your manipulation. The final choice facing you isn't between honor and dishonor. It's between remaining a willing victim of systematic deception or attempting to warn others who have been programmed just as thoroughly as you to reject information that challenges their conditioning. You realize that breaking free from the cycle of beautiful self-destruction requires exactly the kind of independent thinking that your education was designed to eliminate. The system has succeeded so completely that even learning the truth can't save you. But perhaps it might save others if you can find the courage to choose truth over tradition, reality over these beautiful lies that make murder feel like transcendence. The merchant waits for your answer, his ledger still open to the page that prices your death at 47 Rio. Less than a good horse, more than a year's rate. What price is the truth worth when the lie has consumed your entire world? Epilogue: The Weight of Truth. Years pass before you find the words to tell this story. Some truths are too heavy to carry alone, too dangerous to speak aloud, too devastating to believe. But silence perpetuates the machinery of beautiful destruction, and perhaps someone, somewhere, might have the courage to choose differently. The cherry blossoms still fall each spring, but now you see them differently, not as symbols of beautiful brief life, but as reminders that some cycles can be broken if we're willing to see beyond the poetry of our own destruction. The rain continues falling on training grounds, where tomorrow's warriors learn to die beautifully, but perhaps this story might reach someone before the conditioning becomes complete, before honor transforms into suicide, before tradition becomes indistinguishable from trauma. Your story ends here, but other stories might begin differently if the truth finds fertile ground in minds not yet closed to uncomfortable realities about beautiful lies. The samurai code demanded death before dishonor. But perhaps the greatest honor lies in choosing life over the systems that profit from your beautiful dying. The choice, as always, remains yours to make. The merchant himself enters the room as you finish reading, his face showing no surprise at your discovery. "You understand now," he says quietly. "The question is, what will you do with this knowledge?" Your hand moves toward your sword but stops. Killing the messenger won't change the message. The system that created you has systematically destroyed your ability to respond effectively to this information. You've been programmed too thoroughly to break your conditioning, even when confronted with proof of your manipulation. The merchant continues, his voice carrying the weight of someone who has watched this revelation destroy countless warriors before you. Every samurai who finds these documents reacts the same way: shock, rage, then paralysis. Your education removed your capacity for revolution, along with your ability to question authority. Listen to the sound of rain beginning to fall outside, each drop carrying the weight of all the tears that will never be shed by warriors who die believing their sacrifice has meaning. The weather doesn't care about human suffering, just as the economic systems that profit from your death don't care about the lives they consume to maintain their profitability. You realize that your entire bloodline has been systematically harvested for profit across multiple generations, each family member convinced that their sacrifice honored their ancestors, while actually perpetuating the cycle that murdered their ancestors. Your grandfather's death funded the system that programmed your father for suicide, which funded the system currently programming your son for the same beautiful self-destruction. The documentation includes psychological profiles of your family dating back 5 generations, with researchers tracking inherited trauma responses and documenting how each generation becomes more susceptible to suicidal programming than the last. Your bloodline has been selectively bred for self-destruction, like livestock optimized for slaughter through careful genetic management. International correspondence reveals that Japan's samurai elimination project is being studied by colonial administrators in other countries seeking to destroy indigenous warrior cultures through similar psychological manipulation techniques. Your cultural destruction is being exported as expertise, your people's suffering transformed into consultation services for global empire building. The merchants' trading routes carry more than silk and spices. They transport techniques for cultural annihilation, psychological warfare methods, and population control strategies developed through systematic experimentation on samurai families. Your destruction enables the destruction of warriors you'll never meet in countries you'll never see. Regional development contracts specify that former samurai lands will be converted to tea and silk production for international markets, with agricultural profits shared between Japanese administrators and foreign investors who provide the capital for cultural elimination programs. Your death enables colonial economic transformation that will erase your people's identity completely. The Master Timeline projects complete cultural replacement within 2 generations, with surviving Japanese populations re-educated to view samurai traditions as primitive barbarism that prevented their country's modernization. Your honor will be remembered as historical mental illness, your courage reframed as evidence of Japanese cultural inferiority. Professional cultural destruction specialists include modules on samurai psychology in their training programs, teaching foreign administrators how to identify and eliminate indigenous resistance leaders through targeted psychological manipulation disguised as cultural preservation. Your tradition is being studied to perfect techniques for destroying other traditions. The final revelation appears in correspondence between program coordinators who express amazement at how efficiently samurai can be convinced to eliminate themselves through appeals to honor and duty. The remarkable thing, one letter notes, is how eagerly they embrace their own destruction when we frame it as spiritual achievement. You understand now that breaking free from this cycle requires exactly the kind of independent moral reasoning that your education was designed to eliminate. The system succeeded so completely that even discovering the truth cannot save you. Your conditioning runs too deep to overcome through simple knowledge of your manipulation. The merchant watches your face as the understanding settles like poison in your mind. Some warriors try to warn others, he says softly. They are usually dismissed as madmen or traitors. The programming works too well. People reject information that challenges beliefs they've been conditioned to view as sacred. You realize that your choices have been reduced to 3 equally impossible options. Maintain the beautiful lie that makes your suffering meaningful, embrace the ugly truth that makes your entire existence meaningless, or attempt to save others who have been programmed just as thoroughly as you to reject salvation. The weight of this knowledge settles on your shoulders like armor made of lead. Every breath becomes an effort, every heartbeat a reminder that you're a product rather than a person, a manufactured weapon rather than a human being with inherent worth. The rain intensifies outside, washing away the blood from yesterday's suicide ceremonies while preparing the ground for tomorrow's ritual deaths. The cycle continues because the truth is too heavy for conditioned minds to bear, too dangerous for programmed hearts to accept. You look at the merchant's ledger one final time, seeing your death price listed at 47 Ryo, less than a good horse, more than a year's rice. The number represents more than economic calculation. It reveals the complete reduction of human worth to commodity value in systems designed to profit from beautiful dying. The choice facing you isn't between honor and dishonor anymore. It's between remaining a willing victim of systematic deception or attempting to break cycles of inherited trauma that span generations. But breaking free requires capabilities that the same system systematically destroyed through childhood conditioning. Standing in this moment of terrible clarity, you understand that the greatest tragedy isn't your individual death. It's the perpetuation of systems that convert human courage into renewable profit through institutional programming disguised as spiritual education. The merchant closes his ledger and prepares to leave. The truth changes nothing, he says, not unkindly. But perhaps knowing why you're dying makes the dying easier to bear. As he disappears into the rain, you're left alone with knowledge that weighs more than your sword. Truth that cuts deeper than any blade, and choices that offer no escape from systems designed to transform even revelation into resignation. The final entry in the merchant's ledger haunts your thoughts. Investment in samurai cultural preservation programs continues to generate exceptional returns through sustainable warrior elimination, disguised as traditional honor maintenance. Recommend expansion to additional indigenous populations for these similar results. Your death isn't spiritual achievement, it's market research for techniques that will be used to destroy other cultures through their own value systems, other peoples through their own traditions, other warriors through their own courage. The rain falls harder now, and somewhere in the distance temple bells ring for evening prayers, or perhaps for another samurai who has chosen beautiful death over ugly truth, perpetuating cycles that profit everyone except the people dying for them. In the end, you realise that honour itself has become the weapon used to destroy the honourable, tradition the tool for eliminating those who value tradition, and courage the means for ensuring that the courageous never survive long enough to question the systems that consume their bravery. The cycle continues, beautiful and terrible, profitable and deadly, because the truth is too heavy for hearts trained from childhood to prefer beautiful lies over uncomfortable realities. But perhaps, just perhaps, someone might read this story and choose differently. The choice, as always, remains yours to make.